17. On the relationship of people in good and evil. In the course of resisting evil, one should act first through internal dilution, conversation, and transformation of evil feelings. Secondly, through internal-external compulsion and discipline of an evil will, and then thirdly, through external compulsion and suppression of evil deeds. In this case, the latter two methods of resistance should serve the first, as lower stages serving the highest, not replacing it with themselves, but building up to it and making it available. The recognition of this rule results not only from a correct understanding of evil and love, but also from a correct understanding of human communication and life together, for all people, regardless of whether or not they know about it or wish for it to be the case, are connected with each other by a universal, reciprocal connection in good and evil, and this link imposes on them certain eminent, irrepealable, mutual obligations and subordinates them to certain spiritual rules. In order to perceive this universal connection, it must be seen, as it were, firsthand in one's own psycho-spiritual experience. In fact, man is arranged by nature so that his psycho-spiritual life is hidden from all other people and is directly accessible only through one's own knowledge of their well-being and partly through self-observation. My soul is inaccessible to other people, and other people's souls are inaccessible to me. Another's soul is in darkness. Knowing this and greatly overestimating their own secrecy and inaccessibility, most people build their lives and their behavior around the resulting possibility of self-division. One I consists of what I keep to myself, and the other I consists of that which I reveal in front of others. At the same time, they often imagine that they know themselves truly and completely, and that others not only know exclusively about themselves, but also that they do not consider it necessary to hide anything of themselves. This double self-deception is often established and maintained by a sense of decency, which prohibits people from concealing the true dimension of their mutual awareness from each other. In reality, every person knows himself poorly, and always reveals all his basic attributes and inclinations entirely. A person does not know himself well, firstly, because every human soul in its vastness consists of unconscious, unremarkable, or forgotten contents, abilities, desires, proclivities, and habits, as well as semi-conscious emotions, sentiments, associations, and shades. Only one who has systematically explored his unconscious and his character through the method of involuntary association can understand and measure the degree to which people only have limited and incorrect ideas of themselves. Secondly, a person does not know himself well because he very readily, easily, and imperceptibly forgets about himself much which is unpleasant and bad, reinterprets all of this in a positive light, and therefore idealizes himself, loves himself, and gets angry when he is subject to supposedly unfair blame. With such naive self-perception, a person usually does not suspect that his bodily appearance accurately expresses and correctly conveys his soul in all of its unconscious and conscious facets. In fact, a person is arranged in such a way that his body, eyes, face, facial expression, physiognomy, hands, feet, gait, manners, gestures, laughter, voice, intonation, and all external actions not only harbors his soul, but also reveals it, and, moreover, with the accuracy of a good mirror. True, to our benefit or misfortune, people know little about this, pay little attention to this corporeal cipher of the soul, and do not know how to decode it with their own conscious mind. But unconsciously, people perceive each other in this encrypted form as a seamless whole expressed through their bodies. The fact is, all that lives in man exists in the form of a mental state and a corresponding physical condition, and vice versa. Every physical condition of the person most assuredly has a mental element, even though one often doesn't know this and remains unaware of exactly the ways in which it is expressed. A person, with every potential state he could exist in, speaks, as it were, two languages at once, the language of the body and the language of the soul. And it follows then, that thanks to this double being, the human body appears to blurt out what the soul, perhaps, would like to hide not only from others, but also from itself. Each of us finds that our entire soul, as it were, leaches into our body and is fully manifested in it, and therefore those who see and hear us, those who often do not know it, experience at every given moment all of our soul in its basic structure. Hence why people often know much more about each other than they themselves understand and can express in words. In the unconscious experience of communication, a person perceives in the other everything that his body expresses and gives away about his soul, and it is understandable that only a small amount of this information penetrates the conscious mind of the person who perceives, and everything else, perceived yet not realized, does not simply evaporate, but remains alive in the depths inaccessible to consciousness. When such things are reached by the conscious mind, they usually appear in the form of vague affinities and antipathies. trust and mistrust, hunches and suspicions, and all these glimpses of knowledge can be completely correct in content, but when it comes to clarifying and justifying them, consciousness cannot and does not know how. However, this knowledge can be improved and brought to the heights of real vision with adequate, prolonged spiritual work. It is because of this integrity and depth of unconscious communication that no single good or evil event in anyone's personal life remains the exclusive property of his isolated soul. In thousands of ways, it is always manifested, expressed, and transmitted to others, and not only insofar as he wants it to be, but also in direct contradiction to his preferences in this regard. Every internal act of spite, hatred, envy, vengefulness, contempt, and falsehood inevitably changes the fabric and rhythm of the psychic life of the person himself and is just as inevitably, though imperceptibly, expressed through the body and transmitted to all around, and then through them echoes further and further. This wave of vice and evil becomes all the more intense and noticeable in accordance with how repetitively, deeply, and intimately the soul is given over to these states, and it is clear that in the faces of Judas, Richard III, Pope Alexander VI, and Malyuta Skuratov, everyone will read with his conscious mind what slips unnoticed by his soul when perceiving an ordinary person. And, vice versa, every inner act of kindness, love, forgiveness, reverence, sincerity, prayer, and repentance inevitably alters the fabric and rhythm of psychic life and, imperceptibly expressed in the gaze, in the face, in the gait, is imperceptibly transmitted to all other people. And again, this wave of kindness, purity, and nobility becomes all the more intense and noticeable in accordance with how deeply the soul has been reborn in these states. And it is understandable that in the face of Macarius the Great, Francis of Assisi, Patriarch Hermogenes, and the Optina elders, everyone will see what he will not be able to recognize in fleeting glimpses of everyday kindness. Because of this unconscious integrity of communication and transmission, neither good nor evil has a purely personal or private character in people's lives. Any good, independent, even from external actions, is kind not only regarding oneself, but also for others. Every evil, even if it is based on spite regarding oneself, is evil, harmful, and poisonous for all mankind. All that I am, I then multiply in other souls both consciously and unconsciously, by doing and by not doing, intentionally and unintentionally. Man is not allowed to be while he does not wreak, for he wreaks simply by virtue of being. Everyone, even the most inconspicuous and unimportant person, creates by himself and around himself the atmosphere of what he is devoted to, what he does, what his soul is obsessed with. A good man is a living hearth of good and strength in good, while an evil man is the living hearth of evil, strength in evil, and weakness in good. People involuntarily ennoble each other with their purely personal nobleness, and by the same measure, they involuntarily infect each other if they themselves are internally infected with wickedness and evil. Therefore, everyone is responsible not only for himself, but also for all that he transfers to others. What he sends to them, pours into them, infects or enriches, and if he does send them infection, if he infects someone else's soul and poisons it, leads it to commit certain acts, then he is answerable to the same extent for the consequences of these acts as he is for the consequences of his own. This is why in the living communion of people, everyone carries everyone else within himself and, in ascending, lifts up everyone behind him, and in falling, drops everyone behind him. Therefore, the entire city standing on the 10 righteous is not an empty phrase or an exaggeration, but represents a real and living spiritual fact. For someone who truly sees this universal living connection in themselves and in others, it will render unavoidable a whole series of necessary conclusions in the recognition of a whole series of laws and rules. Thus, firstly, it is evident from this that the evil in human souls retains its being, its power, and its virulence even when it does not spill out into any definite external actions. It continues to live and reproduce itself, poisoning both the soul of its bearer and the souls of those who perceive it in reflection. This is why the primary struggle against evil must be conducted internally in a psycho-spiritual dimension, and it must be recognized that external measures of compulsion and suppression can never reach someone within their internal shelter and transform them in quite the same manner. Secondly, it is necessary to recognize that the universal mutual connection of people in good and evil is not only a socio-psychological fact, but that it carries a certain spiritual task within itself, setting great responsibilities for people, along with a whole series of duties. For people are not simply connected by interaction, but by interaction in good and evil, mutual ennoblement and mutual destruction. They stand before the face of God, and each of them always deals with others who are younger and weaker, to whom temptations can be transmitted via them. But if each of the people, carrying in themselves the known origin of evil, is responsible both for themselves and for others, then the correct attitude to one's own evil is expressed not in the fact that one can fight it if he wishes to, but in the fact that he is obliged to fight with it under all conditions and has no right to forego this struggle. For by foregoing it, he harms not only himself, but everyone. The wells of human souls have, as it were, a connected, subterranean, unconscious network of messages, and one who clogs and poisons his own well clogs and poisons the wells of all. A person who does not observe spiritual hygiene is a hotbed of universal societal contamination. This is why each person, apart from the religious and spiritual call to fight with their own evil, has a public duty to educate themselves, spiritually cleanse their souls, restrain their evil will, compel themselves, coerce themselves, and, if necessary, to compel themselves using the necessary forms of self-compulsion. If this is the duty of man in his relation to his purely internal evil, then it is clear that there can be no question of any right to commit evil acts. A person who realizes his inner evil in an external act not only himself sins or falls, but he makes the universal spiritual connection between people a direct instrument of evil and its imposition. Allowing his personal evil to break through and become an external act, he surrenders to its power, gives it a life of its own, and himself becomes a public volcano of evil. He, as it were, shreds public connectedness at the highest level, tramples upon the basic duty of self-restraint, and violently, intrusively encroaches beyond the boundaries of his own evil into the souls of others in the entire social atmosphere. He makes others truly experience all the abomination of matured evil, its hideous spiritual nature, its ugly content, its life-destroying rhythm, its ungodly purpose. The strong he forces to witness all of this, and the weak he forces to witness it, to become infected by it, and, perhaps, internally or even externally to submit to it. Thus he gives life in the souls of others to a whole system of unconscious reproduction, half-conscious imitation, and retaliatory detonation. He compromises the spiritual balance of some, tempts or infects others, hypnotically subdues still others. An evil act always conceals an element of offense, violation, abuse, and imperiousness, and therefore the evil that breaks through in an act aggressively and authoritatively draws the souls of all people towards it, making them free or unwilling accomplices to the villain. In view of all this, it is pointless to perniciously defend the freedom of crime. Evil is given too much latitude when it is allowed to dwell unmolested inside a person's soul, imperceptibly poisoning the souls of others. One can with confidence foresee what would happen if the wise advice of the non-resistors was accepted and if it was publicly established that no one should dare to stop the activities of villains who were unable or unwilling to restrain their evil desires and preferred to freely live out all of their evil feelings, designs, and intentions. There is no doubt that soon, as a result of this, the world would be left with only villains and their terrified slaves. To defend the freedom of crime can only be the work of a very naive or stupid doctrinaire, one who believes that people live like isolated atoms, that evil is not contagious, and that the villain is nothing more than an angry but ultimately good-hearted individual. It would also be in vain to advocate for this point of view in the language of those supporters of unlimited personal freedom who believe that, according to conviction, a person has the right to do everything because convictions are free and acts of conviction are the highest expression of self-worth in life. Such a formal approach to good and evil would be completely untenable, for good and evil are not formal principles. It's not enough to say, I am convicted. It is necessary to have substantive grounds for your conviction. Conviction can in fact result not from objective evidence, but from delusional obsession or perverse passion. And really, can a sensible person seriously believe that it is enough for any scoundrel to refer to his scoundrel beliefs in order to secure his objective righteousness and a public permit for unhindered action? If this is true, one would have to admit that a non-scoundrel, also convicted of the correctness of his interdiction, would be equally right and free from hindrance if he brought his sword down on the head of a convicted scoundrel. In opposition to all these evil-minded teachings, it is necessary to explicitly establish that no person has either the freedom of internal malevolence or the freedom of external crime. A healthy, religiously meaningful social atmosphere will always have to act in opposition to malice with measures of mental compulsion, which induce in the malcontent internal self-compulsion and put him on the path of healing. And in opposition to crime, first by measures of physical compulsion and suppression, authoritatively halting the outward extent of the villain's actions, and then measures of internal spiritual influence. You cannot allow evil to decisively establish itself and spread through external actions, encroaching in the form of a brazen appeal and temptation for weak and, perhaps, semi-poisoned souls. No one has the right to act with evil, nor to make himself a shrine to the freedom of villains. Moreover, everyone is obligated to resist evildoers and villains, to resist proactively and effectively, to resist both the inner will and the external act, to resist not in anger and revenge, but in love and service. And this duty among people is mutual. The duty of mutual education is connected with people in the same way that they are bound by the inevitable interaction in good and evil. For in the work of good and in the struggle against evil, people are not isolated. True, each person deals first of all with his own soul, which is directly accessible only to him, and with the evil desires and passions that live within it. Before all else, one considers his own actions over which he directly controls. But in this, people are already connected by similarity, which opens before them the opportunity to call from well to well, to understand and check each other, to give each other advice and help. And in this voluntary, conscious exchange of spiritual gifts against which the most errant lovers of freedom could not object, the process of mutual education has already been accomplished and is bearing fruit. Problems usually begin only from the moment when one party, consciously or unconsciously, deviating from the path of good, emerges from this similarity, affirms his special, evil purpose, and no longer wishes to participate in this connectedness and reciprocity. Then it usually happens that the one who has broken away in evil begins to assert his evil freedom and, while not declaring that he is pursuing freedom in evil, he appeals to freedom as such, until innocently naive and stupid people, falling into temptation and agreeing with him, do not begin by defending freedom from his abuse, but instead declare themselves for the villain. However, people cannot accept and will never concede that a villain has the privilege of evil freedom, for they are related to each other not only by similarity, but also by reciprocity and communality. People mutually send each other their ascents into good and their descents into evil. They mutually receive what is sent to them, and are mutually responsible for their own influences, even the unconscious ones. In fact, they are called upon not to send evil to one another at all, and to receive from one another only good, while the contrary is forbidden. This calling is so high that failure is very possible, and in the face of this, people attempt to substitute in a superior right to send pure evil to others and to reject any response which comes in the form of a compelling influence of good. Mutuality and justice do not tolerate such an entitlement. Anyone who sends evil must always be cognizant of this and accept that others will be permitted to put a stop to his wicked acts and force him to qualitatively review the evil he sends. The one who, when he receives my evil message, draws my attention to its evil quality, does not harm me, but does me a favor, and he who suppresses my embittered rampage, preventing it from spreading and compelling me to come to my senses, fulfills his duty and becomes my benefactor. This is the mutual duty of people, and each of us, by rendering this service to others and this blessing, should wish for ourselves the same service and the same blessing. Indeed, let everyone do to others only what he would have done unto him. But he must also wish upon himself compulsion and suppression from others in the hour of his own evil acts. However, in the work of good and in the fight against evil, people are connected with each other not only by reciprocity, but also by communality. For they have one unified common goal among themselves, a common good that everyone at once will either possess or not possess, that everyone will gain or everyone will lose at the same time, that is, a peaceful world which blooms from human goodwill. It is the coherence and communality of this goal that causes people to unite their forces and contribute to a common organization in the struggle against evil. Every villain prevents everyone else from abstaining from villainy. Each resonates and poisons the entire general standard of spiritual being. Therefore, every villain, whilst in the commission of evil acts, must be met with all who unite to resist him. This resistance is conducted by few on behalf of all, and on behalf of a people's unified common goal. This is the meaning of any spiritually consequential social organization. A sense of mutual connection and mutual responsibility, when it has matured, indicates to people their common spiritual goal and induces them to create a unified common authority to serve it. This authority, ecclesiastic or state, affirms in its person the living body of the shared sacred purpose, the body of good, the body of holiness, and therefore performs all of its services for the population and on its behalf. The compulsive and suppressive representative of such a social union does its work not in isolation, not on a personal whim or arbitrarily. No, it acts as a servant of the common sacred space, designed and obliged to compel and suppress in the name of the population. It is the living body of that power which is made up of all individual, spiritual forces connected by a social solidarity with the common sacred space. This force has the power of the sacred space, and it is its living phenomenon and its living sword. This is due to the fact that a spiritually meaningful public authority draws its rights from its relationship with an overall purpose, and its strength from the shared solidarity. The will of each individual member flows into this power, recognizes it willingly, and, subject to it, retains its spiritual freedom. Moreover, a sense of justice connects everyone with the common and uniform authority in its ministry, so that everyone participates in its acts with both his will and his power, even in those in which he himself does not act directly. And as a result of this, an organization is formed in which the common element of one good and one objective receives a singular and total volitional engine that to a certain extent removes from individual people the task and burden of direct compulsion and suppression of evildoers. Thanks to such an organization, every member of the Union can and must feel that his will and his power are involved in the struggle of the central authority with the onset of the scourge of evil and its agents. This is reflected in the recognition of maintaining the instruments of this struggle not only out of fear, but also as a matter of conscience and sympathy in the form of intense, proactive support. The reigning central authority, in leading this struggle, requires this sympathy and cooperation and has every right to it. Moreover, to triumph in this struggle and build a common life for the sake of a common purpose, the authority can only succeed insofar as the climate of opinion, both in its atomized and in its concentrated state, supports it with sympathy and cooperation. The authority and the people must be unified in their understanding of evil and good, and in solidarity in their volitional rejection of evil. Absent this, both meet their death. This death occurs if one of the parties alters the common purpose or its faithful interpretation. If the authorities begin to appease villains, or if the people begin to harbor them, then the socially organized resistance to evil ceases, yielding its place to more or less pernicious non-resistance, and as a result, the victory of evil proves to be secured. The acceptance of authority and its struggle against evil is expressed not only by the fact that, in service to his conscience, an individual abets the authority in combating the misdeeds of others, but also that he voluntarily accepts compulsion and suppression when it is turned against himself. This conclusion is natural and necessary, for it leads to the law of reciprocity and communality. Anyone who accepts a common goal in a common body will also accept its correct action, regardless of whether it is directed at others or oneself personally. If one possesses mature legal consciousness, then he participates through his will in the actions of the authority even when he himself is compelled, suppressed, punished, or even executed. A just compulsion is perceived by him as a self-compulsion, carried out by a socially allocated and authorized spiritual will, and he sees a just punishment as a well-deserved self-punishment. And even in the case of an unjust death sentence, he can maintain the principle of voluntary acceptance, like Socrates and the great multitude of Christian martyrs. Such are the consistent conclusions from the universal mutual connection of people in good and evil.